Hello, everybody. Welcome to 2026, another year of Microsoft 365 and SharePoint and all of the good stuff. And we are starting out with a bang this year, talking all about SharePoint and OneDrive storage. Everyone's favorite topic, it seems like, especially with the amount of people that we've had and the amount of interest for this webinar. So super excited to be here. I think, Dave, is this our first webinar?
Of
For the
20
year?
of 26. Yeah, it
Of
is. The
26.
inaugural webinar.
Inaugural
Yeah.
webinar. Perfect. All right. So we have, as usual, if you have been to any of our webinars, far more slides and wonderful content than we have the hour for. So we are going to get rocking and rolling here really soon. So thank you all again for joining us. My name is Michael Basarik. I'm one of the founders and the CEO here at Orchestry. Lots of experience in Microsoft 365. Have a huge passion for SharePoint and have a huge passion for making sure that customers aren't paying through the nose for SharePoint storage. So this is definitely something that is of keen interest. David, hello.
Hi, Michael. Yeah, it's great to kick off the year with a really interesting webinar here. Really excited to talk about storage. I'm the head of product strategy here, work with Michael and the team on the Orchestry product, but we love the M365 space and all the wrinkles that it comes with. So toss back to you.
Perfect and hilarious. That's new. You're eagerly awaiting what's it
It
called?
is.
Eagerly awaiting the Cosmere universe. I like it. All
Yes.
right. A little bit about us if you don't know who we are. So we work for Orchestry. We are a management, security, and governance platform for Microsoft 365. We have a whole range of capabilities. We're not going to give you the hard sell, but one of the things we do really well is helping you manage storage in Microsoft 365, and hopefully we're going to get to show a little bit of that. But if you are interested in learning more about Orchestry, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Lots and lots of capabilities coming soon as well. If you've never been to an Orchestry webinar, we like conversations. That's why we use Teams. So if you have any questions as well, feel free to reach out or feel free to put it within the meeting chat. We try to answer a lot of these questions as we go through this webinar. The first question, I know what it's going to be, folks. I know what it's going to be. You don't have to write it down. Yes, we
Michael's
will be
frozen for
sending
me.
out the recording of this webinar later on.
Oh, there it
If you
is.
do want to get the slides, we can also do that as well. Just get in touch with one of our marketing folks. If you are going to use the slides, please don't do what other people do and essentially, what's it called? Just steal them. Just put the Orchestry logo somewhere, right? We've spent a bunch of times making these slides look nice here. All right. Get involved with us as well. Follow us on LinkedIn, find us on X or Twitter or whatever it's called as well through here. All right, first question for everyone while we get going here is, where is everyone joining us from? If you want to just pop it into the meeting chat, we're always interested to see where people are located from. I am in Vancouver, the less snowy part of Canada. David's in Listerwell, which is the far more snowy part of Canada here as well. Far more snowy. All right. So today's agenda, I'm talking very fast. There's a lot to get through here. So we're going to talk about the storage landscape. We're going to talk about the hidden culprits of SharePoint storage, David. We call them the monsters of SharePoint storage. And thanks to modern AI technology, we even have some really great ChatGPT generated SharePoint storage monsters we're going to share with you as well through here. Then we're going to talk a little bit around what Microsoft offers, and we're going to talk about what's taking action as well. But before we begin, David, let us run the first poll. The first poll of today is just who is paying, or are any of you paying extra for SharePoint storage? Because I know with our customers, Dave, we're always shocked at how many people are, even before they come for Orchestry. So we'll put this up here. And let's see how we go. Oh, there's a lot of people. Wow.
A lot of yes.
Wow, there's a lot of yes. All right, folks. We'll let this bubble on a little bit more here. 50 responses. Some of you aren't sure, that's fine. Wow, that is a pretty rough split. I think we can see the results here on the right-hand side, right?
Yes.
Dave, yeah. So almost 50-50. basically, with a bunch of you're not sure. Okay, we are going to start off 2026 with something very, very controversial. And this is our Orchestry point of view. As far as we're concerned, most of you, apart from very specific cases, should not be giving Microsoft your money for SharePoint storage, right? Now, what we're going to try to do is convince you of that and show you how you can do that during this webinar, and we'll come back to this a little bit. But that is our point of view, right? We really think there's enough capabilities in Microsoft 365 that you shouldn't be paying for additional storage. I'll be honest though, Dave, Microsoft doesn't really make it that easy. They tend to kind of err on the side of storing a lot of stuff. But that is our point of view here. So take it to the bank, folks. At the end of this, we'll have a little conversation here in chat, and I'm hoping that we're going to be able to convince some, if not all of you, of our point of view as well. All right, so let's get rocking and rolling here and talk a little bit about understanding the storage landscape in Microsoft 365. I think this picture is very apt. This lady here, guaranteed, she's probably a SharePoint admin looking at the storage reports here, and she's probably a little bit annoyed here. So first thing, kind of understanding the storage architecture through here. Again, there's a lot of confusion around this. So really, there's kind of two separate storage systems that don't share resources. If we look at it holistically, there's three buckets. There's the SharePoint pooled tenant storage. That is all the stuff that you have in SharePoint, Teams, and some other places. The other kind of way to manage storage and what Microsoft has is that OneDrive per user storage. Typically, that's 1 terabyte per person. That's on an individual basis. That doesn't really have a pooled component. It's more from an individual piece. And the last one is around Exchange Mailbox. We're not going to talk about Exchange here, but again, think of these as three separate things. They all have their own quotas, their own enforcement, their own billing logic. You can't borrow capacity from each other. Think of these essentially as three separate bank accounts. Now, Dave, I'll turn this over to you because again, there's these kind of three things are quite different, and it's also quite different in terms of what these three buckets or bank accounts store.
Yeah, I think it's startling to see the amount of things that are getting automatically stored in these, and it's kind of happening behind the scenes, right? So in SharePoint, we know that the files comprise the large majority. But things like channel recordings, Michael, right, are getting stored in SharePoint loop workspaces, SharePoint embedded. This is kind of a growing risk area for people. We'll talk about that later. A lot of that actually counts against your SharePoint quota. And then if you look at OneDrive, this is the one that can also really surprise, right? It's not just the personal files, it's every attachment you're adding into chat, it's your meeting recordings, it's your loop components, it's your whiteboards, it's your OneNotes. And, all of these pose problems, I think, but really the highest risk one by far is SharePoint, right? Because this is the one area where the impacts of one site can impact the entire tenant, right? Whereas with OneDrive and Exchange, the worst case is one user gets locked up, right? They can't use their mailbox or they can't use their OneDrive, Michael. But we know with SharePoint, that's a different story. And so we'll focus more on that today.
Exactly. And the quota model as well, the pooled. So if you buy a tenant, you get 1 terabyte base and an additional of 10 gigabytes per users. That works relatively well for smaller organizations, but for larger organizations, it doesn't matter if your tenant has 10 people or 100,000, you still get that 1 terabyte base. So that's why we find these storage challenges seem to affect customers which are larger, because again, you have that base, but you've got more people. 10 gigabytes per user is really not much, right, in terms of what basically happens and all the activities that occur. So if you've never hit your storage limit, you might not know what happens. Good things don't happen. We can tell you that right now. So on the SharePoint side, once you've hit your storage limit, either for an individual SharePoint site through a site quota or holistically around your tenant, basically everything stops, right? You can't upload anything, saves fail, collaboration freezes. You can download things, you can look at them, but terrible things happen really, really quickly. On the OneDrive side as well, users can't upload or sync new files. That can become a huge disaster. We've heard of lots of customers who like sync these massive kind of shared OneDrive libraries between each other, and they run out of storage and it all goes wrong. And on the Exchange side, basically you can't send or receive emails through here. Now, if we look at the storage pool on the SharePoint side, so remember, let's leave OneDrive alone. Let's look at that kind of SharePoint storage pool. That's really where the risk is, because that's where the majority of content that people are creating is stored. So what gets stored and created in there? So obviously all of the SharePoint sites and pages, Teams channel files, Teams channel meeting recordings. Again, this is subtle. Teams channel meeting recordings get stored within the SharePoint site of that team. But if it's a one-to-one meeting and you're recording that, let's say me and Dave set up a one-to-one meeting through Outlook, that meeting gets stored on the organizer's OneDrive. So there's two different things here. Stream videos, it's not called Stream anymore, Dave. It's called Clip Champ, apparently. That's the new name for it. That gets stored on SharePoint also. Loop workspaces, SharePoint embedded containers. We'll talk a little bit around this as well. I know we've got a bit of a star here as well. And then all of the other stuff, Viva Engage communities, form file loads, and everything else. So again, we talked a little bit about the quota through here in terms of how much you essentially get. You know, for 500 users, 6 terabytes seems like a lot. We will show you that it actually isn't, right? And again, you've got some capabilities around kind of capping individual site collections, but really the default is uncapped for your SharePoint sites. Now, when we say it's uncapped, the default cap is 25 terabytes, which is also the maximum size that the SharePoint site can be, rather hilariously. So that's why we're just basically saying that it's untapped as well through here. Now, if you are experiencing storage challenges, we call this the storage health zone. You really want to understand what's going on. The first thing that you have to understand is all of the Microsoft reporting lags, 24 to 48 hours. So if you've only got 5% left and you see I've only got 5% of storage left in my reports, you're probably very close to essentially running out of storage through here. More than 20%, you're kind of green. If you're in 5 to 20%, you're in the yellow zone. Start investigating your growth now. And if you're under 5, we call this the red zone or the brown trousers zone. This is really where you have to go and start to have a real significant look to see what's going on through here. Now, why does this happen? There's a bunch of reasons. The first one is around kind of ownership. And again, for smaller organizations, this is a little bit easier to manage, but we work with lots of organizations which are 500, 5,000, 50,000 people. They might have 20,000 teams and SharePoint sites, 50, 100, 100,000. So this is where it becomes really problematic. The first is really there's no single owner, right? Really difficult to find out what is kind of over storage, under storage. And again, what happens is that it doesn't become anyone's kind of problem, right? So it's everyone's problem, but it's no one's responsibility through here. Again, that whole growth is distributed as well through here. So lots of small additions, things are always changing and everything else through here. The other thing that we also find is kind of content outlives its purpose, right? Projects end, people leave, no one really goes by and does anything, right? So we have a project, we've finished it. No one's going in and removing versions or, you know, deleting stuff that they don't need. They just go on to the next thing. So this kind of old content, which might not be necessary, just lives there forever. And the other thing is the cleanup. So we often find a lot of organizations, you start to do this cleanup and you can't keep pace, right? And we'll talk about why that is, because there's some really strange kind of, I don't know, twerks that Microsoft does there. You need to have some sort of automation in place around this. And the craziest stat is this, right? If you have 1,000 users, if they're just growing storage at 5 megabytes of version growth a day without uploading a single file, that adds up to 1.8 terabytes a year, right? So again, just the way that this is all structured essentially means that most of you, like you're on this webinar, are blowing through storage. But again, remember from the beginning, we don't think you need to. All right, Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you if you want to take control here for the hidden
Let's do it.
culprits. Perfect.
All right. I think we're bang on time here, so I'll try to do my part here, Michael. Keep me honest as the timekeeper. So we had a little bit of fun with this. We are calling these 5 storage culprits our storage monsters, both because they're scary, but also because they can be monstrously large problems, right? So ChatGPT, our good friend here, did a really good job doing the heavy lifting on some pretty comical images to go with each of our monsters here. So our monsters we'll talk about in more detail. One is version sprawl. Second one is preservation hold library. Recycle bins is a good one. SharePoint embedded is really kind of the new monster on the block here, so to speak, in terms of new storage things to be aware of. And meeting recordings is kind of a fifth and more well-known one. So we'll go through these one by one, and we'll show you some actual examples of how this can play out in your tenant. So let's start with our good friend, the 3-eyed version sprawl monster here. And one of the challenges we see with a lot of customers is that 500 versions is by default the kind of set limit for versions. And that's a pretty high number in a lot of cases. You might have said, actually, hang on, I've changed this to the automatic default. And that's great. If you've done that, that would be our first tip of the day here. Turn that on in your tenant. But be aware that that doesn't do anything retroactively. Like most toggles in M365, it's only going to work going forward. So it's only going to work on new libraries going forward. And it's not going to potentially address thousands of libraries that you already have. So if you look at the math, it's simple but brutal, as we say here, right? That you have a 500 meg file and you multiply that by 200 versions, and we're already looking at potentially 100 gigabytes, and there's no real good way to monitor that version growth here. So let's go and look at some basics here behind versions. Did you know all the ways that Microsoft actually creates versions for you? It's a lot, actually, right? You can see the box on the left is large. Auto saving is a great feature. You know, let's not forget that. But at the end of the day, on the desktop, that can be every 10 to 15 minutes. An autosave is snapshotting your document. In the browser, Michael actually removed the number here because there's not really a well-documented number from Microsoft around how frequently it saves in the browser. So it's not clear, which is not great. Co-authoring creates a lot of versions as well. Manual saves if you're one of these people that hit Control S a lot, just from habit, from years and years of losing work.
Yeah, stop doing that.
It's actually, it can be a problem depending on if you have autosave on or not. And all these other things cause versions, even renaming a file. So we're not even always talking about here material changes to the content. It's sometimes metadata changes to the content that is creating versions, and that's troubling, right? When you look at what doesn't create a version, it's really very few things. It's just essentially looking at the file or downloading it. That doesn't materially change anything or the metadata. So the good news is that does not create a new version for you.
Just a comment here from Ruth. Sure. So Ruth, great question. A version is a full 5 size. I thought they had changed that 10 years ago. So Ruth, they did, right? They changed it on Microsoft's side. So they're not storing the full version, but they're still going to charge you for the full version on your side, if that makes sense. So yeah, like as soon as you hit save, if you open up a document and you change anything, a single letter or a single word, Microsoft will charge you for the full version of that size, right? So if it's 10 meg, it's going to be 10 meg, it's going to be 10 meg. They're not charging you for the deltas. Behind the scenes, I'm sure they're storing the deltas because I don't think there's enough kind of capacity storage space on Earth to store this. But in your case, or in everyone's case here, you are essentially going to be not charged the full version, Dave. What's the correct word for it? But you're going to be
the way I typically explain it, this concept is called shredding, typically, right? Yeah. So through the simple answer is that shredding, the ability for Microsoft to only store delta sized changes, only ever applied to Office documents, right? It does not apply to non-Office documents, which is hugely challenging. The other problem is that even for Office documents, as Michael said, it is happening in the background, but it's not visible to you, right? So it's extremely difficult to really figure out what actually you're going to get billed for, and even looking at the site storage can be really a mystery to try to make sense of. I'll show you an example here with a PowerPoint in 2 slides here that shows you that that is really, really unclear. So let me talk through an example, and then we'll show you a real example actually of this very PowerPoint deck we're showing you today and how it has grown over just 3 days, right? So this is a fictitious example to start us off here, right? But this is not strange by any means, right? Typical work week, you have a few people authoring a 50 meg deck, 12 versions on Monday, 2 more versions on Tuesday. And this just grows and grows and grows. And look at what happened here with something quite interesting here that I'll ask anyone on the call if they can truly make sense of what they see on the screen. The deck on the left, according to SharePoint, tells us that it is a 28.5 megabyte file. But if you look at the version history on the right, we're already at version 124 after what, just 3 or 4 days? Michael, this is not even a long-lived PowerPoint.
No.
Look at the size that is being stored per version, right? So this file size is not in actuality 28.5 megabytes. It is somewhere between 28.5 and 28.5 multiplied by 124, right? It is somewhere between those 2 ranges.
Yeah, and if you want to know what happened here with our fabulous designer, Rob Sweeney, Rob had this deck open and was doing some design work, and you can see autosave kick in here, right? Where it's saving an a version every 10 or so minutes. Again, this is when we saw this morning, I was like, what the hell was Rob doing? He's like, I wasn't doing anything. I was just editing slides. So again, that's the autosave that's kicking in there. So you can see, Rob probably didn't want to create 20 versions last night, but unfortunately he did as well. And also major props to Rob, because we can see the last version was at 11:59 p.m. So thank you, Rob, for for doing that as well.
So that's a really good example, right? So then let's turn to monster number 2, which is the preservation hold library. Some of you are familiar with this beast and some of you are not. If you have retention policies turned on in your environment, you likely are, right? What does that mean? Basically, what this means is that if you have retention policies where content cannot be deleted, if users try to delete either versions or files themselves, they don't actually get deleted. They just get shuffled from one library to another protected library called the preservation hold library. So even if you have version limits in place and you think you're monitoring and managing things that way, guess what? Retention policies are going to override your version limits, right? Because it's going to try to retain everything. So you're going to end up here with potentially a problem that looks and ends up behaving worse than you expected it to in theory.
Yeah,
right?
this is horrific. We see this across customers all of the time, right? And a lot of the times it's someone just assigning a retention policy at the site level for like no delete for 7 years. Just so you know, if you do this, it's very difficult to control storage, because every time you go and delete something, it goes into the preservation hold library here as well, and you tear through storage. Dave will talk a little bit about this as well. But yeah, this is really, really dangerous thing. Not a dangerous thing, but there's some big side effects here.
Yeah, it's hard. Even like global admins can't do things here unless blocks are removed, right? So this is a very technical subject. I won't go into all these bullets. You guys will have access to these slides. But if you have retention in place, it's good to kind of understand how that's actually going to potentially impact your storage. And we have a very simple visual to show you here, basically what's happening behind the scenes, right? So you might have someone doing a cleanup effort in the document library of a site, but little did you know that all that's really happening is that content is moving from your documents library into the preservation hold library, right? So unfortunately here, this can be really frustrating because you can have users trying to do the right thing, or administrators even trying to do the right thing, performing cleanups, but having zero impact on your storage footprint in your environment. Let's play this one more time. And this is just, I think, a really useful animation to show what's happening behind the scenes here. Now let's keep going. Let's talk about our third storage monster, Michael, which is recycle bins. I think most people now, SharePoint people know about recycle bins, and a lot of them know about the two-stage recycle bins. But I think one of the challenges we see with customers, often customers that are fighting almost like a weekly battle, Michael, against them hitting the edge of their tenant storage quota,
Yeah.
is that they are looking at that bar and they know that they deleted things and they're trying to see why that bar hasn't improved, right? And oftentimes it's second stage recycle bins, right? They've actually purged things, but until you completely clear both stages of the recycle bins, Microsoft is not crediting you for any savings, right? So this can be another little loophole that can get people unexpectedly and can really be a challenge, right? Is that you've tried to delete a whole bunch of things, and unless you go and have a script to go empty all those recycle bins, you might have to be waiting 93 days before you actually see a savings.
Yeah, and it's an issue as well if you're getting your users to go and do this because they're going and deleting stuff and they're like, well, I've deleted it. What the hell's the problem, right? Like, why isn't
Right.
this come back? And if the users aren't site collection admins, they can't even go in and delete the second stage recycle bin. So this is one of the big challenges as well when we talked at the beginning. If you've got 4 or 5%, it's a real challenge because even if you say to people, start deleting your stuff, that effect is not going to be known basically for over 3 months here.
All right, so let's do our second poll here before we talk about embedded. I'm going to launch a poll here and see how many of you on the call are actively managing your SharePoint embedded containers. Let's focus it on from a storage perspective here, at least, Michael, right? That's the focus of the call. So
Yeah.
how many of you are actively managing SharePoint embedded currently and thinking about it as part of your SharePoint storage strategy? Let's let this go here. We got 95%, Michael, of people saying no, which is not surprising because it is a rather new problem, but it is very, very interesting to see. I'm going to stop the poll here. And let's talk for a moment about embedded, and we'll even show you an example of our tenant.
Yeah, and Ruth Genoway enjoying the chat here. Ruth, you think it's not applicable, but you wait till the SharePoint embedded storage monster here is going to come out because you might not think it's applicable, but I think it might be. So let's have a look here.
Yeah, a lot of things are getting stored there now without you actively doing anything. So it's important to kind of know what's happening there. This is where I'll pause and just briefly talk about first party versus third party because it is confusing. If you are using or creating custom or third party embedded containers, those do not get billed against your SharePoint quota. They get billed as a pay as you go in Azure. But anything that's a first-party container, that means anytime you create a loop workspace, for example, or anytime you have Copilot generated content or notes, all of that is automatically going to be creating SharePoint embedded containers for you behind the scenes. And guess what? That storage counts against your SharePoint quota, right? So here is our tenant. I think Michael and I were quite surprised. We just looked at this morning. I thought I would only see maybe 5 or 10 things in here, Michael, and we have what, 50 or 100?
No, we have like 500 things. I have no idea what
500.
any of this stuff is basically at all.
Right.
Yeah, we don't know what it is, who it is, where it came from. And again, SharePoint embedded for some reason from Microsoft is really kind of this black box. It's really difficult to manage, really difficult to understand what's going on. But again, if people are using loop workspaces and pages and everything else, this is accumulating within the back here also.
Right. So this can be a scary one. And like an example we saw when we were experimenting ourselves with creating a knowledge agent internally is, oh, good question. Where is this active container? Yeah, that's actually a great question. It's not in the same place as your site collection list. You need to go to a different section of the admin center in SharePoint admin to see the containers, which is also frustrating.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
But here's an example of like content getting stored in an embedded container that I didn't realize until I actually explored it, right? So I created a very basic knowledge agent just playing around in Copilot Studio a couple months ago. And one of the things you can do, right, is you can ground these in specific content and you can upload content to these, right, from any source, right? So if you do that, guess what? It's actually creating a container for you, but you don't really know about it. And unless you're a SharePoint admin, you'll have no idea where it is or how to manage it. So that's a challenge. Big challenge. Let's move to our fifth and final monster here before we talk a little bit about what Microsoft helps us with on these in terms of these problems. Meeting recordings. It depends on the organization how big of a problem this is. But of course, first of all, the first thing you have to wrap your head around is where do they get stored, right? Well, if it's a channel meeting in Teams, it's going to get stored in SharePoint against the quota. If it's a non-channel meeting, so like a private chat, I call up Michael after this call, that'll be going into my OneDrive, right? So that in itself is challenging, right? Because some of them will be going someplace and some in another, and it's difficult to train users on this. And secondly, these files are actually sometimes very large. I looked at my own in past weeks, Michael, and I saw that hour-long calls were between 200 megs and a gigabyte for hour-long calls, right?
So it's not, yeah,
that's a lot, right? That's a large amount of storage.
That's also a lot of flux, because I see the same thing. Like the meeting's roughly the same time, but the file size varies anywhere between 200 meg to like a gig. Like I don't know how or
I'm
why.
not sure why they range so much. I'd have to do more detailed analysis, but that again is a challenge. Now, most organizations have an out-of-the-box setting turned on. I want to call this out. This is good for Microsoft, right? They have a 120-day auto expiry. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have seen these emails where you get that says, hey, we've thrown this recording into the recycle bin. Click here if you want to restore it. What I want to call out here, which is really important, is if anyone restores a file from that recycle bin, i.e. they see a recording, they don't like that it's deleted, and they click restore, that file is forever exempt from auto expiry again, right? So if you have your users just hoarding their recordings because they're worried that they will need them, keep in mind there's no process that's going to pick them up and archive them again once they're restored. That's the challenge.
And bit of a quick tip, you should be using channel meeting recordings instead of the OneDrive ones. We understand why people don't, but try to do that. There's a bunch of advantages with that also.
So as we close the chapter here on our monsters, the real issue is the compounding effect of these problems, right? Not just one by itself. Version sprawl can be terabytes a year. The preservation hold can be working against your cleanup efforts. Recycle bins can have gigabytes of data in limbo for 93 days. SharePoint containers are growing without any management happening, and meeting recordings, especially the ones that are restored, are hoarding sometimes gigabytes of space in the background, and that's just a growing problem that we're going to continue to see. So this, on top of things that we call out as operational triggers for the consultants and partners on the call, we all know about this: migration graveyards that exist in your tenants from on-prem, departed employees' OneDrives that are containing just absolutely crazy amounts of data, and then this kind of growth of file heavy, video heavy collaboration and rich media is also contributing to this problem as well. So I'll toss it back to you, Michael, for this amazing Microsoft walkthrough that you have here.
All right, folks, lots of monsters. All is not lost, though, my friends. We are going to kill these monsters. By the way, I don't know what people think. These are very cute monsters. My daughter really enjoyed the four of them. She asked to have stuffy toys made of them.
Good idea.
If people want stuffy toys, let us know. But I think these monsters turned out really well. All right. Luckily, folks, there is a bunch of capabilities that Microsoft provides. And I remember when Dave and I started on this, we thought, we're just going to look at version history and some trimming and all of that sort of stuff. Turns out there's a lot of storage management capabilities that can help you in Microsoft 365. Unfortunately, like all of Microsoft 365, they're a little bit all over the place. They're a little bit difficult to configure. And the default options, which most people don't change, on the side of helping you consume as much storage as you possibly can. So that's typically why. So let's go through some of these. We're going to go through these really, really quickly because there's a lot here. Some of these might be new to you and some might not be. The first thing from an analytics standpoint, there's a lot of analytics that you can get. They're not great. They're kind of a little bit all over the place. But on the tenant level, you can understand your SharePoint storage usage. If you go to reports, usage, SharePoint storage, they're going to show you there as well through here. You can view historical growth trends and future storage and everything else. As soon as you hit 80%, Microsoft is going to start giving you some recommendations. Hilariously enough, the first recommendation is going to give you is buy more storage instead of manage your storage, but it is what it is. I thought that was pretty interesting. The other thing that you'll also find is if you go to the SharePoint Admin Center, you can also, if you click on active sites, you can add the storage column on. Sorry, I know this is a little bit small here, folks, but you can see the storage column and you can see the storage used per gigabyte. You can sort them and you can extract them and all of that sort of good stuff as well through here. On the site level, it's less of a decent story, to be honest with you. So to get storage metrics, you have to go to this very old school SharePoint page. This is from SharePoint 2007, Dave, right? This storage metrics page, it's actually really good. It's just that no one has any idea where the hell it is because Microsoft, I think, has not put any kind of effort into it. But if you go into the storage metrics area, you're going to be able to see all of the storage by folder and by file type as well. Now, it's not going to tell you exactly what it is in terms of how much version it is. It's just for the latest piece as well through there. On the SharePoint Admin Center side, looking for OneDrive in particular. I know we haven't spoken about OneDrive a bunch here, but OneDrive storage is really difficult to understand. Again, OneDrive sites don't show in the SharePoint site, so you have to go to people's individual profiles if you want to see how much storage is used or edit them, or you go to the OneDrive users and reports page and you can see how many files and how much storage has been used through here. Again, the storage kind of reporting story on OneDrive is a little bit more confusing than on SharePoint, but at least you have some sort of idea of where this is.
Something, yeah.
The second thing that we want to talk about is modern versioning. So Microsoft, or intelligent versioning, modern versioning, whatever you want to call it. So I think Microsoft knew the old school way of having 500 default versions is going to be an issue. So I think last year, and when I say last year, I'm referring to 2024 because I don't believe it's 2026 yet. They introduced the concept of what we call intelligent versioning for SharePoint online. So that default of 500 versions with no expiration policy and co-authoring generated many versions, there's a new capability set now. Now, there's different ways that you can manage this. It's probably the first thing that you should be doing is changing from that 500 default version down. The problem with it is, again, if you change it now, it's only going to apply to new lists, libraries, and sites going forward, but it can really help. And it's a little bit different than what we used to do. So now there's 3 ways that you can manage version history, right, within SharePoint Online. The first is this kind of manual. So this is what they call the no time limit kind of manual option. So again, the manual with no time limit basically allows you to keep a set number of versions. The default is 500. Through the UI, you can choose from 100 all the way up to 50,000 versions if you want to go that far. That seems a little bit extreme, but that is possible. The other one is doing a manual with the time limit. So essentially, you can say, I want to say that we want to purge or not keep any versions of content that's greater than 60 days, 90 days, or 180 days, for instance. So again, it can be really useful as well. And then the last one is what's called intelligent versioning. So this is the one that Microsoft recommends that people use. Again, the way that the algorithm works, it keeps a lot of versions for a small period of time for the first 30 days. And then over time as well, it kind of changes it through here. Now, in terms of the automatic version history, there is some stuff from Microsoft here. But again, they say it's a proprietary algorithm, so no one knows how it works. I've heard some pretty good reports from most people, although on the chat here, maybe there's a bit of a differing opinion through here. But again, it can really save you some limits. And even something as simple, what we would recommend, change it to either manual less than 500, like 50 versions or 100 versions. I think the best one is days, right, Dave? Like just remove all the stuff that hasn't been touched for 6 months. Like you don't need to keep all of those versions of that content as well. Now, if you are running into issues with storage, Dave, how many of you folks on the call here are aware of the version trimming functionality that was introduced through here? Because this is something that can be a lifesaver for people. So we'll just let this go here for a second. Not many people are. Oh, this is going to be great here, folks.
Oh, this is going to be life-saving for some of you.
All right, I'm gonna keep going and rocking and rolling here.
Okay.
All right. There's a new capability in Microsoft 365 which they introduced called version trimming. The whole idea for this is if you've got these libraries which have got masses of content, you can now go and trim versions of that. So it's a great way to save a ton of storage. And I think, Dave, in the chat, there's some good stories of how much storage people have saved here. There's a great way to be able to kind of trim these versions. Before Microsoft introduced this, people were running scripts to go and find documents with a bunch of versions and everything else. But this can all be done automatically through here. Now, when I say automatically, there's no UI for this. Unless you use something like Orchestry, of course, but there's no UI. You have to go and do this through PowerShell. But it allows you to trim your existing versions in 3 different ways. One of them is you apply this automatic trimming piece, basically. A second one is you do what we call a manual trim based on the amount of days or based on the amount of versions, right? So again, you can say, I want to trim all of my sites or a particular library, and I want to trim or remove all of the versions of documents if it's more than 30 versions old, for instance, or if it's older than 6 months. So there's a lot of really good capabilities here also. From a version trimming standpoint, there's some things you have to know here. So again, you have to be careful with this. The reason for that is that unlike a normal delete, which goes into the recycle bin, if you use this capabilities, these files get deleted to the ether. They don't exist anymore, right?
Well,
you have to be really careful.
Yeah.
The versions don't exist through here. So there's a bunch of jobs that you have here. Microsoft also gives you a kind of what if analysis as well through here. So you can basically say, well, if I trim the last 6 months versus the last 3 months, what does this look like? So there's some really good capabilities through here. The other thing to note as well is these trim jobs are background jobs. They can take days, or we've heard of customers that taking weeks, especially if you've got a whole bunch of files as well through here. So again, it can take a lot of time as well through here. Some important considerations as well through here. If you've got retention policies and version trimming, it's not going to work, right? So again, you have to make sure that you understand what those retention policies, e-discovery holds, legal holds do. So again, we see that with a lot of customers. They get super excited about this, but nothing happens because they've got retention policies on these sites. The trimmed versions are permanently deleted, right? And existing libraries, again, they're not retroactive. You have to go and do this across each library, right? If you're going to do it across hundreds of libraries and hundreds of sites, it becomes really, really difficult, but it is an option through there. The biggest thing, like I said, is these versions, by this delete trim job, they don't go to the recycle bin, right? They get blown away forever. So you have to be a little bit careful as well through here. Quickly keep rocking and rolling here. So site quotas, again, I'm not sure how many people use site quotas here. It can be really useful. Out of the box, what essentially happens is there's an automatic site quota that Microsoft provides you, and the default is 25 terabytes. That's a lot for a SharePoint site. The Microsoft default is also rather hilariously the maximum that the SharePoint site can be. Try to put this down a little bit, right? 25 terabytes, I don't think anyone needs a site, Dave, of 25 terabytes. It's insane. Put it down to, I don't know, 500 gig, a terabyte, whatever else you want through here. If you are using site quotas, there's a lot of good stuff that you can do. You get alerts, site collection owners can get notified, all of that sort of stuff as well. So some good things as well. A couple of other things you can do. An inactive site policy from SAM, so SharePoint Advanced Management. Again, you can use this to kind of clean up a lot of the stuff that you have. So a really good thing you can say is, well, we're going to find out if these sites are actively being used or not. If they're not being used, then what you can do is to select an enforcement type that this can actually go to the M365 archive. So it can kind of help you archive content automatically through here as well. The other thing that you can use is the M365 archive piece as well through here. Now, this is the site level archive feature. This, folks, you should be using if you're running out of SharePoint storage, because again, what happens now, you can move your SharePoint sites from what they call hot storage into cold storage. And instead of paying 20 cents a gig for additional quota, you only pay 5 cents a gig here. And that's only charged when you exceed that tenant quota. The really good thing about M365 site archiving, all that good stuff that you want continues. E-discovery, retention labels, sensitivity labels, DLP, all continue to apply through here. It's also free to reactivate this stuff as well through here as well. I got a couple of other things, Dave, but I'm not going to go through them because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
There's another one which is coming, which I know people are very interested in, and we are very interested in as well. Microsoft, and if you've seen this, is working on a new feature called item level archiving. This is a huge thing for a lot of organizations. Now, this is all publicly available information from our good folks at Microsoft. Again, the idea with this is now you can archive these files at the individual level. So one of the challenges with the site level archiving is if you archive a site in the M365 archive and someone navigates to it, they don't know what the hell's in that site, right? With the file level archiving, they can still see those items. They can rehydrate them as well. But the beautiful thing as well is that you get a 75% reduction in your storage costs, the same as site archived as well through here. Now, the good thing for current Orchestry customers and all of you folks who are going to be potential Orchestry customers is we've been part of the private preview. We've been working with Microsoft really heavily around this, and there's some very cool stuff we're going to be developing around this. And I know, Dave, you're super excited about this. I think this file level archival thing will be huge for customers to save on storage.
Yeah, we'll talk about it here in this next section, and let me take control again here.
To you, yeah.
I'll go quickly through this section because again, these slides will be available, and then I'd love to show you a couple things we're working on around item level archival and this kind of two-step, two-punch process that we have. So let's talk about we call these the three levers of storage reclamation. We've got the limit, the trim, and the archive. Many of you today you're very familiar with the limit. A lot of you were not familiar with the trim, and then we'd encourage you to look at archive, whether that's the M365 archive or another method. It doesn't have to be this method, but this is a good option because it's first party, it's well supported. Curtis is right. The challenge with this, like I say here, is I call this a cooldown, which fits nicely into the World of Warcraft metaphors, where if you rehydrate a site from the archive, and this will be the same for the item level archive, if you rehydrate something from the archive, you cannot re-archive it for 4 months. So there's a 4-month cooldown, is the way I describe it, on being able to cast that spell again, right? So keep that in mind. Trimming, definitely look at it, and these three together are what make a powerful trio. When we look at why customers often do this spring cleaning, they run into a problem where it's still not enough, right? You have problems where you're looking at the wrong things, the 93-day delay. Lots of things can really add up to make your spring cleaning efforts not work, and I'll show you an animation of that in a second. And then there is a real cost this inaction. I'm just going to throw some numbers at you. If you're looking at the cost per gig per month of 0.2, that 20-cent cost doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have petabytes of data in your tenant, that is a lot, right? And just that one additional terabyte per year is $2,400, right? So this is a big deal. 30% of our customers are paying for this. On the call today, it was closer to 50, which is astounding to see. The problem seems to be getting worse. If we look at really the difference between a spring cleanup and more of a proactive continuous governance approach, which is why we're kind of looking at ways to do this within our tool in Orchestry, is we want to turn these like periodic spring cleaning projects into automated policies that are just running in the background, right? Instead of this spiking effect, like you'll see in this diagram, or not a diagram, in this animation here, that red line, you see that every spring cleaning is doing a little bit of an improvement for you, but you're still on an overall trajectory to breach your limit, right? That's not really going to change. But the big deal is looking at something that's more proactive in that green line, right? And looking at these options around limiting, trimming, and also archiving old content, which is going to have a um, way more significant impact. Curtis, I can answer your question. It's quite complicated. I'll come back to it, but there's quite a bit of nuance to, does it actually reduce it or the cost? It depends on your scenario. So let's just launch into our last section here. And we were curious how many people thought there was more unexplored territory here, or maybe worth kind of going through this at a slower pace or specific topics. If you would love to see a part 2 of this, we'd love to hear from you. We did 3 parts, I think, Michael, on our unsecured, unseen series.
The permissions one.
Popular.
Yeah. And I know we're
Yeah.
blasting through a lot of this. There's a lot of nuance we're missing out here as well. So
that's great to see that there's appetite for that. So let me walk you through now, not as a sales pitch, but let's talk about what does this continuous governance actually look like in practice, right? So the first thing is visibility, right? You need visibility because you can't govern what you can't see. And if you can't see that SharePoint is spiking versus Exchange versus OneDrive, how that impacts your tenant storage in a single place, it's difficult to take meaningful action, right? One other thing that we think is really critical is this idea of a 1-2 punch, right? So imagine the power of combining both version trimming and archivals into a single continuous process, right? And that's where you really start to see some benefits, right? So let's look at this again. Our archival policies and soon to come our file level policies will allow you to chain version purging, which will first strip down that file and that site down to its bare bones, and then do the archival after that. So this creates an incredible compounding effect, right? And if we look at this more slowly, here's an example of a marketing site. It's 2 years old, no version governance, and there's a lot of creative asset usage, right? That's normal, right? So maybe we have maybe we have a couple terabytes of files distributed across, 42. That statement makes no sense, which is why I'm confusing me across. Let's say it's 1.75 terabytes across hundreds of files, right? If you break that down, you could be looking at like a cost here, assuming you're paying for overage of something like $351 a month for this site, and it's a growing problem. So this is where the first punch, our left hook comes in, right? The first thing you can do is run that version trimming, and we can reduce this 1.757 gigabytes here down by potentially 83%, right? That number depends, of course, on the file distribution, the usage, and the types of versions, all that stuff, right? This is just a scenario, though, that it's not a crazy one, where we can reduce the footprint of this site by up to 80%. That's a huge drastic change. And then where our right hook comes in here, or our second punch after that, is that now we have a much reduced footprint, and this then gets moved over to something like M365 Archive. So when we look at this from a net benefit perspective, it's actually potentially as high as 96% in terms of the cost reduction, right? Because we took something that was costing us $350 a month, and we first purged it down, we trimmed it, we pruned that tree, we reduced the cost down, and then we moved it to something that costs a quarter of what we normally pay for in hot storage. In combination, we've reduced that from $350 to $15 a month with that process. Doing that manually is very hard, Michael, but that's something that we have built in already to our archival policies. And again, will be something we'll be adding to the item level policies as well.
Yeah, and on the item level stuff, it'll be huge because that ability to have stripping out those versions and then archiving it, again, probably I would say at least 60 to 95, 97%, 98% storage
Right.
savings, which would be amazing.
That's huge, right? Other things we do, a few people asked about retroactive version control at scale. This is something we do in the product as well. So how do you make sure that that default is going to be applied to thousands or tens of thousands of existing sites going backwards? Well, you can do it with a couple clicks, right? That's the goal. We don't want you to have to run PowerShell scripts to do that. Let's talk about the final frontier, as I call it. It's a bit of a Star Trek metaphor, but I do truly think that for many customers, they've reached a kind of horizon or a boundary of how much more site level archival they can do. They've already done that, right? So the final frontier or the next frontier for customers is looking at where they can save storage at the item or folder level, right? And that's where these huge graveyard migration sites tend to be very problematic. And so we're working with Microsoft here, and this is an example of what we're looking to build is policies that will run within Orchestry in an automated fashion, very much like our archival policies today, and allow you to set up some rules. For example, let's target all files that haven't been touched in 180 days. Let's target Excel files, document files, and PowerPoint files, and let's target files that tend to be heavy in size. You can do this in a complex way, in a simple way. Maybe even we'll introduce the ability to do it via a KQL query for those of you who are very technical and want to put some very specific combinations of logic to suggest which pieces of content actually should go to the archive. And the beauty of this is that Microsoft is already going to build the UX for you to restore this content and to continue to be able to search for this content. So this is not like this process where this is going into kind of a invisible domain that no one can see. People and users will still see this content in line where it typically existed, but unless it's needed, it's actually going to cost, a fraction of the cost of keeping it there live, right? Which is a big deal.
Yeah, and this is great. I mean, especially on the Orchestry side, when you try to get end users to clean up files, no one wants to delete anything, no one wants to change anything, right? So this idea that either we'll be able to do it automatically for you through like an admin policy, or conversely, be able to do it through confirming with the users by certain policies. We're super excited about this, and we've been again working with some of the Microsoft folks, and it's been awesome. This file level archiving capability is huge. So
It
I
is.
think it's a really, really great functionality from Microsoft here.
I think the other thing we talk about quite a bit here, whether it's in OneDrive here, for example, or whether it's in Teams or SharePoint, is the idea of distributed governance, right? We need workflows and processes and experiences that allow us to involve end users and team owners in this cleanup. Administrators, as much as they are superheroes in every organization that we encounter, can only do so much, right? And I do find, especially at the mid to larger organization size, administrators often want to do a lot, but are not allowed to do as much as they would like. And that creates a really difficult dilemma for them, right? Because they're being asked to reduce the storage, but at the same time, they're being told, don't delete anyone's content, right? So how do you find the middle ground unless you get sign off and approval in a distributed fashion from those team owners? You really have no path forward. So this to us is a really big solution to that problem, is that distributed governance model and making sure that users and team owners and the people closest to the content can participate in this process. Michael, what do we have next in terms of webinars?
Yeah, we got 2 more minutes. I can't believe we got through this. All right. So thanks everyone for joining us. I hope this was useful. Lots of good conversations here as well. We will do a part 2. I think especially once some of the file level archiving stuff is happening. Join us for our next webinar, folks. There is some really, really good stuff coming. So new to Orchestry, Lots of great capabilities. OneDrive management, right, is coming to Orchestry. All the same funky, great capabilities around reporting and policies and everything else is coming. The other one, which we're super excited about, is around license usage and optimization. That is also coming as well. So this is a bit of a launch of a bunch of new features. Please register, because I had to get the marketing team to put this slide in. Please go and register now. But come and join us at the next one. But if you are interested in Orchestry, Dave, if you want to click onto the next slide here, because you are in control here, we do have trials. We have trials available, 28-day fully functional trials. Again, get in touch with us. We can help you understand your SharePoint storage footprint, but not just that, understand governance and guests and users of provisioning and all of that sort of stuff as well through there. Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. For those folks asking, we will send an email out after with the recording. If you want the slides, though, feel free to contact either myself or David or one of our marketing folks directly as well through here. But just let us know. But yeah, again, thank you so much for your time, everyone. Great session. Join us at our next webinar. Me and Dave will do another one of this around SharePoint storage. We'll go into a little bit more depth. We'll see you some more stuff as well through there. But thanks again, everyone.